But let's use, I've been using ReSharper since 2003. It has so many features, but I'm going to use the architecture view and I'm going to show the project dependency diagram of this particular application. And I always like to collapse it in a different way. Let's get some more space over here. I like to collapse it in this view because this really shows the structure of the Visual Studio solution. This is another really, really important part when you are creating a new development environment, a new Git repository, and automating DevOps. You want to make sure the structure of the code is not going to fall in on itself. The code needs to be able to hold itself up. Okay. And so this uses the onion architecture concepts, the onion architecture principles, and just I'll summarize real quick because I've done full-on presentations on onion architecture. Every Visual Studio solution needs to have a project that's called core. Let me just go back to this. It needs to have a project that is called core, and everything else references the core library, and the core library doesn't reference anything. Now, does it reference something? Yes, but nothing of importance. So let me look at dependencies, packages, and frameworks. Look, all it references is kind of the built-in .NET framework stuff. It references logging, but it only references abstraction. So core cannot call out to anything, okay? There will be no code in the core library that calls web services, that reads from a queue, that goes and opens a connection to SQL Server or any other dependency. Core does not have any external dependencies. It only has code that is the middle of your application. That's why we call it core. It's the core of the onion, okay? And think of these other projects as being outside layers of the onion, and they reference core. All the direction of references go towards the inside of the onion, towards the core. And so we have data access. That project includes all of our code that uses Entity Framework to call out to SQL Server, but it references core. Core doesn't reference it. And then we have UI.client, which is our Blazor WebAssembly. Then we have UI.api, which is just a project where UI.server is part of Blazor WebAssembly, but UI.api was a project that refactored the web services into its own subordinate library so that UI.server could act as the startup project, but we didn't have to have the project that had web services know directly about data access. Because if you're a web service, you're not going to be calling into SQL Server directly. You have no business knowing about data access. And so the abstractions are in core, but UI.server is our startup project. The startup project does have to know about all of the dependencies so that the services collection can be configured and dependency injection can be wired up. Then, of course, we have unit test that references core. We have integration test that has to know about all of it. And then acceptance tests, which are our full system test library. And then we have a database project off to the side that doesn't actually have any .NET references. Why? Because it's just a holder for SQL Server migration scripts, okay? And this happens to use the AliSQL simple command line migrations tool. DB up from Octopus Deploy is also a great one. Redgate is doing a lot of heavy development on Flyway, their new product, but it's not rocket science. SQL Server migrations, there was a lot of argument on SQL Server migrations around the 2006 timeframe, but the dust has largely settled. You want to be using one of the migrations tools that have a directory of database change scripts, and the tool really just runs them in order. That's all it does. And so if I wanted to add a new column to this database table, I would have an additional SQL file that had alter table, and then I would add the column there.